In a world where economic interdependence often dictates the rhythm of international relations, the decision by Canada to cut off support to the United States in retaliation against Trump's tariffs sent ripples through the global economy. The shockwaves reverberated not only through North America, but also across the Atlantic, where European Union officials watched with a mix of disbelief and concern. The diplomatic landscape was shifting, and the implications of Canada's bold move were profound. For years, Canada and the United States had enjoyed a relationship characterized by mutual respect, shared values, and a robust trade partnership. The two nations had been each other's largest trading partners, with goods and services flowing across the border with minimal hindrance. However, the advent of tariffs imposed by the Trump administration had changed the dynamics of this relationship. What began as a series of economic measures aimed at protecting American industries quickly escalated into a full-blown trade war, with both sides engaging in tit-for-tat retaliatory actions. The tariffs on steel and aluminum, initially framed as a necessary step to safeguard American jobs, had unintended consequences that rippled through the Canadian economy. Canadian industries, reliant on exports to the U.S., found themselves grappling with increased costs and reduced competitiveness. The Canadian government, led by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, was faced with mounting pressure from domestic industries and citizens who felt the pinch of these economic policies. The narrative of American exceptionalism, once a cornerstone of the bilateral relationship, was now tinged with resentment and betrayal. In the face of these challenges, Trudeau's government sought to respond decisively. The decision to cut off support to the U.S. was not taken lightly. It was a calculated move, aimed at sending a clear message that Canada would not be a passive victim of aggressive trade policies. The Canadian government announced a series of measures that would impact sectors heavily reliant on American markets, including agriculture, manufacturing, and technology. The rhetoric was strong, emphasizing Canada's commitment to standing up for its economic interests and the principles of fair trade. As news of Canada's decision spread, the European Union found itself in a precarious position. The EU had long been a supporter of free trade and multilateralism, championing a rules-based international order. The shock of Canada's actions prompted urgent discussions among EU leaders. They recognized that the transatlantic partnership was at risk, and the potential for a broader economic fallout loomed large. With the U.S. increasingly retreating into protectionism, the EU saw an opportunity to assert its own influence on the global stage. EU officials convened emergency meetings, assessing the potential ramifications of Canada's move. The bloc's leaders understood that Canada's decision could embolden other nations to take similar stances against U.S. tariffs. The fear of a domino effect, where countries would retaliate against American trade policies, was palpable. The EU's internal discussions were marked by a sense of urgency, as leaders contemplated how to navigate this new reality while preserving the integrity of their own trade agreements. In the midst of these discussions, the EU recognized the importance of solidarity with Canada. The bloc had its own grievances against U.S. trade policies, particularly in the wake of tariffs imposed on European goods. The EU's response was to express its support for Canada, framing the situation as a collective struggle against unilateralism. Statements of solidarity poured in from various EU leaders, emphasizing the need to uphold the principles of fair trade and mutual respect among nations. As the situation unfolded, the media coverage intensified. Headlines across the globe captured the drama of the moment. Canada cuts ties with U.S. Transatlantic relations in crisis. EU watches with bated breath. Analysts and commentators weighed in, dissecting the potential consequences of Canada's bold move. Some hailed it as a necessary stand against American aggression, while others warned of the dangers of escalating tensions. The narrative was complex, filled with layers of economic, political, and social implications. In Canada, public opinion was sharply divided. Many citizens rallied behind Trudeau's government, viewing the decision as a long-overdue assertion of national sovereignty. They believed that Canada had been too accommodating to U.S. demands for too long, and that it was time to prioritize Canadian interests. Rallies and demonstrations sprang up across the country, with citizens waving flags and chanting slogans in support of the government's stance. Social media buzzed with discussions about the importance of standing up to bullies, and the #StandWithCanada trended nationally. However, there were also voices of dissent. Critics of the government argued that cutting off support to the U.S. could have dire consequences for the Canadian economy. They pointed to the interconnectedness of the two nations and warned that such a drastic move could lead to job losses and increased prices for consumers. The debate was heated, with economists weighing in on the potential fallout and the long-term implications for Canadian industries. As the days turned into weeks, the U.S. administration responded to Canada's decision with a mixture of defiance and frustration. President Trump, known for his combative style, took to social media to express his disdain for Canada's actions. He framed the situation as a betrayal and reinforced the narrative that America was being treated unfairly by its neighbors. The rhetoric was charged, with threats of further tariffs and punitive measures aimed at Canada. The stage was set for a prolonged standoff, with both sides digging in their heels. In the midst of this escalating conflict, diplomatic channels remained open, albeit strained. Back-channel negotiations began as both Canada and the U.S. sought to find a way to de-escalate the situation. Canadian officials reached out to their American counterparts, emphasizing the importance of dialogue and cooperation. They sought to remind the U.S. of the shared values that had historically underpinned the bilateral relationship. The challenge was to navigate the complex web of economic interests while addressing the underlying tensions that had arisen. Meanwhile, the EU seized the opportunity to position itself as a mediator in the conflict. European leaders recognized that a resolution was critical not only for Canada and the U.S., but also for the stability of the global economy. They proposed hosting a summit that would bring together representatives from both nations to discuss the trade dispute. The idea was met with cautious optimism, as leaders hoped that a multilateral approach could help bridge the divide. As discussions progressed, the economic ramifications of Canada's decision began to materialize. Industries that had once thrived on the U.S. market now found themselves grappling with uncertainty. Canadian farmers faced challenges as they sought alternative markets for their products, while manufacturers struggled to adapt to new trade realities. The Canadian economy, once buoyed by its strong ties to the U.S., now faced a period of adjustment, with businesses forced to rethink their strategies and supply chains. In the U.S., the political landscape was equally tumultuous. The trade war had become a defining issue, with Democrats and Republicans alike grappling with the implications of Trump's policies. While some Republican lawmakers supported the administration's stance, others began to voice concerns about the long-term consequences of the tariffs. The divide within the party was evident as economic realities began to clash with political ideologies. As the situation unfolded, the global economy braced for impact. Markets reacted to the uncertainty, with stock prices fluctuating in response to news from both sides. Investors watched closely, weighing the potential outcomes of the escalating trade war. The interconnectedness of the global economy meant that the repercussions of Canada's decision were not confined to North America. They rippled through markets worldwide. In the midst of this chaos, the importance of diplomacy and dialogue became increasingly apparent. The proposed summit, facilitated by the EU, emerged as a beacon of hope. Leaders from Canada and the U.S. agreed to participate, recognizing that finding common ground was essential to restoring stability. The summit was framed as an opportunity to reset the relationship, to move beyond the acrimony, and to work towards a more collaborative approach to trade. As the summit approached, anticipation grew. Leaders prepared to engage in discussions that would not only address the immediate trade dispute, but also lay the groundwork for a more sustainable future. The stakes were high, and the world watched with bated breath, hoping for a resolution that would restore the transatlantic partnership and reaffirm the principles of free trade. In the end, the summit proved to be a pivotal moment in the evolving narrative of Canada-U.S. relations. While tensions remained, the willingness of leaders to engage in meaningful dialogue signaled a recognition of the importance of cooperation. The path forward would not be easy, but the commitment to finding common ground provided a glimmer of hope in an otherwise tumultuous landscape. As the dust began to settle, it became clear that Canada's decision to cut off support to the U.S. had catalyzed a broader conversation about trade, economic interdependence, and the need for nations to navigate their relationships with care. The shockwaves of that decision reverberated far beyond North America, reminding the world of the delicate balance that exists in international relations and the profound impact that economic policies can have on the lives of individuals and nations alike.